being the parent of someone in addiction. Welcome back to Irrepressible. Ordinary people, extraordinary resilience, and this is the final episode of this series, the second series of Irrepressible. It's been an incredible journey again, speaking to some incredible people, and this is massively a case of last but not least. I could argue this is one of the most important conversations, I think, that I may have had throughout both of the series. And the reason that I say that is because it's one that I don't think I've seen being had very often, at least. I certainly haven't seen it being had in this way. In this episode, I speak to Michal. Now, Michal's son, Tal, was one of the first people that I interviewed for this series. And he talked about his journey and where he's got to. And Michal comes on and talks about her journey as the parent of somebody trapped in addiction. But what she does, that is the part that I don't think I've seen before, is reflects in a real way, really vulnerable way, where she's looked at the addiction, recognized it was a family illness, and then set about reflecting. I was going to say in a non-judgmental way, but I imagine that there was some self-judgment in there, and Michal talks about that. But she also talks about finding self-compassion and the need to find that, and then using that to be able to look at herself, to be able to do some work herself and reflect on some of the impacts her parenting might have had on her son. It's an incredible episode as a result of this, because as I say, I think what Michal is doing is actually talking about the fears and the emotions and the internal feelings that every parent must go through, but is doing it in a way that is reflective, and I think has helped her to kind of move forward in her life as well, and comprehend what that means to her, and reflect on her own life, and listen, I'm an advocate for family, for addiction being seen as a family illness, and I think this episode really again highlights that. I'm hugely grateful to have been able to share this episode with you. I often get people asking me if I have any content, if there's anything I can share about being the parent of somebody trapped in addiction, and I'm thankful now to have somewhere to be able to point them, and for it to be as powerful as this. If this is the first time that you've ever been here, please make sure you have subscribed and turned on the notifications so you know each and every time that we post a new video. But sit back and you're going to learn from this, and as I was interviewing and being in this, and as I watched this back, I realized just how powerful it was, and there were some moments that were almost tricky and difficult to be in, and that's the kind of conversations that we needed, because they're the ones that are going to create the meaningful change, and they're the type of conversation that are going to help other people in the same space, in the same circumstances, feel more human and feel more seen. So I am very excited by my guest today. I'm really interested about what we're going to talk about and where it's going to go. A friend of mine now for a little while. So why don't I throw it over to you and let you introduce yourself?
Okay, so my name is Michal Booker Taylor. A lot of people call me Michelle because my name is a bit difficult to get their teeth round. I met you, Josh, on the CTI Fundamentals introductory weekend, and we clicked, didn't we? We had a really good chemistry in understanding life in a certain way, and we've remained friends since. And that's it, really. Who I am is I'm a person trying to figure life out still at the age of 50.
Yeah.
And I think I think that's really it to this moment, really.
Yeah, I love that. That's probably the best answer I've had for that question as well. And yeah, like you said, we've known each other for a little while now, and like I say, it's a real sort of honor. I'm grateful to be able to do this today. So,
Thank
look, why don't we jump straight in, and why don't you tell us a little bit about the adversity that you've faced that's meant that you've had to be resilient?
Well, I think that adversity is also quite a point of perspective, isn't it? But I guess that my childhood was a very adult experience. I've always been an adult. And through that experience, it's meant that I've had to learn things and understand things and really experience things from a place that today I recognize was really unsuitable.
Mm.
You know, there is no blame here. I don't point the finger, but at the time, I was thrown into various experiences and situations that really made me feel like I was responsible for everyone and everything around me from a very, very young age, probably from before I can even have a memory. I used to dress myself for school at a young age, prepare my own breakfast at a young age, wait for the taxi to come and pick me up for school all by myself. And I was probably 7 years old at that time. And it all felt very natural. That was kind of how my life was, my home environment was. There was always a lot of love and a lot of words of affirmation and all that kind of stuff. But actually, there wasn't a lot of that care there, that nurturing that as a child I needed. But not knowing any different, it felt that was my role. That's where I needed to be. That was my life.
Was there a stage where you started to become aware that you felt like that? I think, like what you said about, by the way, I've always had to be an adult. I think that's like a really powerful statement. And it sort of really struck me when you said it. Do you remember when you became aware of that?
I don't think there was even an awareness that there was anything different. So I don't think I became really aware of how different it should have been until I probably had my own children, really. Right. And I didn't want them to feel the same. So unfortunately, by my own experience being so extreme, to an extent, I went to the other extreme of not wanting them to be the adults. And so I think there was a lot of enmeshment in the way that I brought up my children from my own experience, and then really not being parent educated enough. So I went to the other extreme of kind of really wanting them to have a childhood where they were children, but there's a balance, with everything, there's a balance. And that balance was very, very hard to find.
Yeah. And what did that look like then? What did that look like for you you talk about going to the other extreme. Some people watching might not understand how you can go to even the other extreme of that. So what did that look like? What did that mean?
Well, I think it meant that, I felt that by loving them how I was not loved, I would be able to create for them a healthier upbringing. And I think that loving them so hard caused for really some suffocation to an extent, and the lack of them being able to make decisions for themselves and develop their own intuition and rely on their own abilities as amazing human beings, which they are. Because I was always there emotionally. I wouldn't say I was always there physically, because I worked and I was very young and I, had my own demons and all my own issues to deal with. But I was always there emotionally. And I think that to an extent, I became an emotional crutch for them. And in turn, their resilience didn't really develop in the same way as maybe it should have developed.
Yeah.
So I almost took away from them their own right to become resilient.
Wow. Wow. And how have you come to that realization? Because I don't think many parents could sit there and talk in that way, in the way that you just have. Is that something that you've sort of always recognized? Have you come to a realization of that?
So my son Tal has done one of your podcasts, and he had he went on a journey about 18 months ago, which led to rehab for addiction. And his story is quite well documented through certain podcasts and with you. And I guess that was the moment that my parenting, and at that point I was a parent. I had been a parent for 27 years. My eldest son was 27 at that point, and my parenting became challenged, really. I think that for me, and I've been a parent since the age of 21, so the majority of my life has been parenting. And for me, the biggest worry always was that, and I think I share this with a lot of other parents, is one of my children not being well. So when that moment came, when Tal called me to say that he was unwell with his own addiction and everything that came out after that, I had to step up to the challenge. We throw around unconditional love, and we throw around, I'll do anything for you, whatever you need. I'm always there. I'm always by your side, kind of parenting, mantras and sentences. But there was a moment where I had to step up to all those love declarations that I'd made over the period of 26 years. And I realized then that I had to go on a parenting journey to an extent to try and understand where it was that I might have contributed somewhere to those feelings that he had.
Was you able to do that, like, compassionately? To me, you sound like you've got quite a lot of compassion for yourself in the way that you've been able to reflect on that.
No, compassion for myself was not something that was there at the beginning at all. And I think that because I've always been an adult and I don't have any memories of being a child, I have memories of playing in the park and, those kind of stories, visions that I have. And, I grew up in a very free kind of neighborhood and I was able to do all those kind of things, but I don't have any memories of not being an adult. I was very cross with myself. How did I not see some of the signs? How was I not able to help him earlier on? And I still struggle with those. And when I have my therapy, often it comes out that how did I not know? What is wrong with me that I didn't know? That he was struggling, that he was, in the place that he was. Certain signs were there, but it's you. I don't know. No. So no, I don't have a lot of compassion for myself. I'm trying to get more.
Even now, you don't.
It comes and goes. I've got more now than I did 18, 20 months ago. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that the most amazing thing from this journey for him, and the journey that it's taken me on alongside him and our family, because addiction and mental health affects all the family. Yeah, it's just not it's not something that only affects the individual. And I think that the 12 steps and the rehab program really looks after the loved ones in the way that it doesn't put blame. And I was very, very grateful when I learned that, because my biggest fear was to lose him, and not to the addiction and all the awful things that go with that. That's completely separate. But my biggest fear was when he worked on himself, I would turn out to be a terrible person. And the 12 steps really honors everyone's role within the family and makes the individual accept responsibility for their own, for their own journey. And that I found very, very, very powerful. And really, because of that, I allow myself some forgiveness. Because the fear of, of him going on that most enormous exploration and emotional journey to understand how he got to that dark, awful place he was in, meant that he had to look at all of us within the family. And that was a real threat to me at the time.
Yeah, it must have been so hard. And I guess that it's a kind of like scenario or thought process that people that haven't been in this situation, as in being the parent in this situation,
Yeah.
might not necessarily think about, right?
No. And I agree. And I think that really highlights that, you know, every person that is fighting a mental health issue, and everything that goes with it, where their trauma, wherever they are with their trauma and what it brings out in them, there are people around them that have contributed to that. Yeah, you know, it could be somebody at school, it can be a passerby, it can be an accident, it can be a parent, it can be a sibling, it can be, you know, a trauma can be caused by somebody who loves you more than life itself. You know, a trauma does not need to be caused by an enemy or somebody who wants to hurt you. And more often than not, probably, not that I have the statistics and it's not my expertise, but I feel like in reality, more often than not, trauma is actually caused by people who love you, who just don't understand you necessarily, who just don't realize what a dig or a joke or anything that they can say or do, the consequences of that and where that can lead to from there. So I really, it was very important for me when he embarked on his recovery to try and understand more deeply my role in how he got to be so unwell, you know, almost under my watch, really. You know, my kid, my watch. How did that happen?
And so and that's what started the journey of you looking at your life in that way.
Yes.
And realizing when you were younger.
Yes.
It's so important because, like you say, when we talk about trauma gets seen as like this big scary word, right? As like this big traumatic event must have happened by and been caused by people that weren't nice and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And like you've just said there, and I don't know the statistics myself, it's likely that trauma is often caused by somebody that loved you and was trying actually to love you, right?
Yes, totally. 100%. And what's really interesting is during my exploration of myself, my journey of trying to figure out, you know, obviously when Tal became openly unwell, you know, there are 3 other siblings. I have 3 other children, and, you know, and we are a blended family, and Tal has a, you know, other step siblings, and, you know, we're a large blended family. Everyone else in our immediate, so within my 4 children, reacted slightly differently. You know, all of a sudden, they also had a voice in a way that something didn't feel right to them too, but from their perspective. What was very, very interesting about it, and it was my greatest light bulb moment in the most random of instances, was the understanding that there are 5 love languages, and everyone understands love in their own language. And the reason why I'm so now trying to get more involved in parenting and coaching around communication and all that kind of stuff is because if I would have known that from a younger age, I would have been able to love my children in their own language. But I loved them so hard in my own language that almost I caused them pain by loving them in that way, because they weren't loved necessarily. And I'm talking about them as a whole, but of course they've all got their own story and they're individual people in their own right. And, you know, but I loved them in my way, and my way wasn't necessarily interpreted by them as love. And that was such a massive, massive moment of realization. And at the same time, a moment when I realized that, okay, I haven't really been a bad person. I just didn't understand the parenting role in a way that I should have probably, or I could have, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably true for so many parents, though. Reflecting on a parent myself, right?
Yeah.
There's no manual. So, I
No.
mean, you know, if you didn't have the completely perfect idyllic childhood, which I don't think many people do, by the way,
Hmm.
then how do you learn? Well, you tend to learn from
Yeah.
from the mistakes, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. But it's some, again, like trauma, big T's and little T's. Mistakes, there's big M's and little M's. There are some mistakes that really do affect people for the rest of their lives. And
Yeah.
so, I starting to understand my role as a parent in a healthier way, and talking about resilience for a second, the only thing that kept me sane, other than the love of my family, of course, was faith. Just throwing it up there to my higher power, my own God, and saying, I can't do this by myself. I mean, this is just beyond my ability to fathom any of this. I mean, really, how did I get here?
Mm.
How did we as a family get here? How did I, as a parent, as a person, as a human being, with the best intentions in the world, literally get here?
Yeah.
And, help me get through this with some sanity and some, and I guess some benefit. Let me be of benefit now.
To other people from what you've learned, yeah.
Yeah. And through so I think that one of the things that with Tal going into rehab and the journey that has followed him since, and he continues to go on, is that I felt that really importantly, I wanted him to feel, and I'm sure if my therapist will hear this, she'll be screaming in the background, you're trying to stay in control and stuff like that. But anyway, we'll park that side. But, wanted him to feel that he wasn't alone on this journey.
Mm.
And so I felt that to encourage him to really do the work, which is such hard work for anyone who has or is struggling with addiction, and lots of negative self-talk and low self-esteem and all that kind of stuff, is really for me to do my work as well, so that he would not feel that he was alone in it all. Because ultimately, unless you really are alone in the world, and that must be tremendously difficult, the people around you that love you want to help you, want to be there and understand you. So I kind of took it upon myself to really go on a journey myself, so that I would be able to support him in the healthier, most relevant and correct way for him.
100. That is the learning there.
Yes.
For me, that is the massive learning from everything that you've said. And I know you talked a little bit at the beginning that you struggle with the self-compassion thing, right? But at no point in what you've said so far to me has it felt like you, maybe you did at the beginning, maybe you felt this way at the beginning, but it doesn't feel like blame, right? It's not like you're going, this is
No.
my fault,
No.
right? It also, like, you haven't gone, my job now, or you may have to agree to a degree, you've gone, right, I want to support him, how do I best support him? And that hasn't
Yes.
been by like trying to control what he
No.
does and make sure he stays on the journey,
No.
which is, I'd
No.
imagine, a hell of a lot of parents find themselves in that position. Let me lock him up and get him to do the work. What you've done, which I think is incredible, especially how quickly you've done it. Like, you haven't gone 10 years of trying to do the other stuff, of trying to control him and make him stay, on his track. You've reflected and you've gone, the best way I can help my son is to do the work on myself.
Yeah. And the truth is that when you say all those things, it triggers me immediately, because that's all I wanted to do. All I wanted to do was take him, move him in with me, give him the spare room, feed him pasta and all the things he likes, and just make it better. That's it.
Yeah.
Make it better. What can I do to make it better? What can I buy you? What can I give you? What can I say to you? What can I show you to make it better? And the hardest part of all was the realization and the honesty that I had to have with myself, that I had done all that to date. I'd done all that. And where did it get him, or where did it get us? Absolutely nowhere. In fact, all that did was make everything worse.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really, really hard pill to swallow. The realization that loving him how I did and always wanting to make it better, you know, bad mood, bad days, depression, anxiety, you know, or what can I buy you? What can I give you? What can I feed you? Make it better, was redundant. That didn't exist anymore. That had gone, that ship had sailed. You know, there was no chicken nuggets and chips and an early bedtime. That had gone. He is an adult. And we have to look at this from an adult view. And he has to gain his power back now. He has to gain control over his life. And only he can do that. And I have to step away. I have got to let him do the work for himself, because if he doesn't do the work for himself, he's never going to appreciate his own strength and his own resilience and his own bravery and his own incredibleness that I see and I love so much. So having to really, really step back and say, right, there are people around him that know about this a lot better than me. And all I can do is learn from them and from him. Let him be my teacher. Let him teach me how to parent him better. And when I say this about him, I refer to my other children as well, although he was really the instigator of the journey by him, you know, hitting his rock bottom. But the language and the conversations go now with all of them. How can I better serve you as a parent? And it's really, really hard. And I'm getting very emotional because I think that if parents only knew to have that conversation and say, I love you, really hard, which I suspect as parents we all do. I'm definitely not unique in that. But how best can I parent you?
Yeah.
What is it that you need from me?
It's like, it's so incredibly simple, right? Quote unquote simple, but so difficult as a parent to stand back, because that love that you talk about, that we all have for our children, right? It's that love that pushes us to want to do I love what you said, the chicken nuggets and chips thing, and an early night. Like, you don't have to feel any of this. Let's get away from all this difficult. Let me take them away. Let me pull away. And then they never learn to build that emotional understanding and that emotional resilience, right?
Yeah. And the truth is that, you know, in and amongst the trauma and the, you know, for him, the addiction and everything that has followed through from that realization is and are incredible people that all have the ability to really, really be brave and vulnerable and loved and loving and compassionate and empathic and all those things, those positive, incredible things that we talk about and we use so often. Everyone has that in them, you know, but so often I feel, certainly for myself, that I was so intent on being it to them that I forgot to allow them to see it themselves.
It's like we said, seems so incredibly simple, but I just recognized how hard it is. And do you think, like, you probably, I don't know if you can answer this question, do you think most parents that find themselves in your position go down that route, the chicken nuggets and chips in an early night, just on repeat?
I can't imagine them not, really, because unless they understand and they've had some insight into, you know, parenting and themselves and their journey, and I think that's the automatic pilot. And 18, 20 months later, it is still my go-to reaction. I still want to, you know, overcompensate. I still want to overlove. I still reach for my old habits of what can I buy you? What can I do for you? What can I say to you? What can I cook for you to make your day better?
Yeah.
I hope, I'm a lot more in control of that. And I don't react like I used to. But that's still my go-to behavior. It's my learned behavior, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what I always did. It's hard to break that cycle, but only in so what's interesting is understanding that was harmful is what stops me from doing it. So now, because all I want to do is cause my children to feel love and positivity and everything that goes with that, knowing how harmful that is what stops me from doing it compulsively, just like that.
It's incredible.
Because in my awareness now, I know it's harmful.
Yeah. Yeah. How's it changed your family? What's the family like now?
Again, we're still early into a lifetime of learning and adjusting, but without a shadow of a doubt, there is much, much more honesty. And there is much more balance in the roles that everyone plays within the family. And I would like to think that there is a lot less stress. And something we haven't touched on, but is a world of its own, is obviously codependency, which was clearly very rife in our family. And that's something that we've all been working on. So we are, without a shadow of a doubt, healthier for the experience.
Yeah.
And much more supportive in a healthier way. To call it a blessing in disguise is probably sounds a bit fairy tale, but there's definitely an element of that hopefully in time, further down the line, when everyone has really found their place in the world and within their own being, it will be a blessing in disguise. It has little glimmers of that every so often, mainly for the honesty in the family, the ability to say how we feel in a safer environment, in a safer understanding of each other.
Yeah. And everybody feels safer to communicate their true feelings, right? Their true emotions. That's what I'm getting from what you're saying.
I believe so. Again, it's early days, and I can't say that it would probably, it's 100% and everyone is sorted and we're all sailing into the sunset of this. And I think it's a lifetime of work.
Yeah,
sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
It's a lifetime of work, and there will be moments when someone oversteps the mark. I'm sure it will be me, that oversteps the mark in trying to fix something in the wrong way, or trying to go back into a triggered, learned, instinctive behavior. There's no question about that. But I know, and I think that this is, for me, the most important taking of this whole thing, the learning of this, is I know now, and I trust now, that they know that nothing that I do from a good place is it. I've worded it wrong, but nothing that I do is from a bad place. I'm also a product of my upbringing in my environment, and there's a lot more forgiveness there now, because I feel that I have also stepped up to doing the work, and I'm also a work in progress. And I think that some of the things that our children don't necessarily see or know about us is we really are winging it.
Yeah.
Like, just the same as they are.
Yeah.
I'm really, by the grace of God, I really am winging it every day. And, I'm not always going to get it right, but tell me that I'm not getting it right. Be kind to me that I'm not getting it right. And I will learn from that.
That's just such an incredible insight as well for everyone to learn, because I think what we do as children, even when we're adults, I mean, as adult children, is we forget that our parents are human. We see them in a completely different way to what we would any other human, right? As if they're some kind of like untouchable superhero when they're not. They're just another human being
Yeah.
winging it in the same way
Yeah.
that we are. And I think
Yeah.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
What one, I'm a little bit conscious of time, but
Of course.
what one thing would you say? What one thing would you say is the most important learning out of this whole experience?
It follows me all the time. It's something I did believe before, but I really, really, really wasn't sure it would be as powerful. And I really wasn't sure whether this is really going to be the crux of it. But I do believe strongly that love wins. I think with the right love, with honesty, with accountability, and vulnerability, all those things, I think they win in the end, because I feel that, just being honest as parents about our own experience, just being honest about our intentions for our children, being able to say, I'm sorry if I hurt you unintentionally, which is what we do most of the time, is unintentional, and loving, really saying unconditionally and proving that unconditionally actually is that. When I got that phone call, there was lots of things I could have said and done, but stepping up into the love and saying, we're going to deal with this together. I hope, I believe, and I really, really hope was that moment of change. I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by love. I'm supported by family. I don't need to deal with this by myself. And I think that really is, for me, that is the key. Stepping into love, always, always, always.
Incredible. That's just, I feel like that's the perfect thing to end on. To just bring it back to love, right? And having that for ourselves and for the people around us is what enables us to be able to show up in the right way, I guess. I want to say thank you. I'm so grateful. It's like been even better than I could have imagined. The insight, like proper takeaway insight. This needs to be seen by people, particularly parents, I think, that, whose children may have just gone into recovery, adult children,
Yeah.
Is there a way for people to contact you if they want to reach out? I can put it all in the notes anyway.
We'll talk about that later, but more importantly, just, we've got to keep on going.
Thank you. It's been incredible.
Thank you, Josh, so much. Wonderful talking to you.